Every city has that one structure, a house with caved-in siding or an industrial lot overgrown with weeds. We drive past them every day, but there is a specific kind of dread in asking what exactly is waiting on the other side of a door society locked long ago. It takes a certain kind of morbid curiosity to ignore a boarded-up window or step past a no-trespassing sign. We want to see what time leaves behind, to look inside the spaces that have slipped out of public memory. By analyzing verified accounts of people who actually crossed those thresholds, we can categorize these forgotten spaces into 3 distinct typologies. When you walk into a rotting building, the obvious danger is physical, a floorboard giving way or a ceiling collapsing. But the ultimate fear explorers describe has nothing to do with architecture. It is the sudden, quiet realization that a space assumed to be completely abandoned actually has someone or something living inside it. These encounters suggest that the most lasting danger isn't the building itself, but the psychological shadow that follows an explorer home, replacing the thrill of discovery with a permanent sense of being watched. The first typology is the lost community. These are massive complexes left to rot all at once. Take this Cold War-era military village, shut down and entirely abandoned in 1984. It sat decaying, isolated in the brush, for 3 decades. The scale of these sites is what makes them so disorienting. At its peak, this specific base housed over 200 military families simultaneously in multi-story barracks. It was a functioning, self-contained town. Years after it closed, a group of high school seniors managed to manually lift an unmanned security gate and roll their car down a dirt path with the headlights off. Bypassing that final checkpoint, they entered a neighborhood frozen in the mid-80s, streets littered with old mattresses and dressers, like a distorted mirror of reality. Inside one of the gutted homes, the quiet was broken by the distinct, heavy sound of boots creaking on the wood floors upstairs. They froze. Stepping back toward the door, they looked through a side window and saw 3 shadows, the silhouettes of heads, moving along the exterior wall of the house next door. They bolted for their car in the dark, but as the first friend reached the vehicle, he screamed. Standing there, with one leg already halfway into the open backseat of their car, was a tall woman in a filthy black dress. She let go of the door and vanished into the brush. A vast, sprawling complex like a military base provides endless camouflage. In a lost community, it becomes entirely impossible to tell if you are running from a ghost or a very real, very desperate squatter. The second typology is the decaying relic. These are ancient, heavily compromised ruins where the structure itself is actively collapsing, presenting severe physical danger to anyone who enters. To get inside one such home, an explorer had to physically kick down a boarded-up front door. Half the living room floor was completely missing, exposing a massive drop directly into a cavernous basement. Upstairs, the decay felt deeply personal. Inside a narrow, cobweb-choked crawlspace, the explorer found boxes of unopened diapers and baby food, decades old, caked in dust, and chewed entirely through by rodents. Right as the smell of decay became overwhelming, a rhythmic creaking echoed from down the hall. He crept toward the opposite bedroom, stepping into the doorway. Sitting by the window in the pitch black, facing away from him, was a figure in a long skirt. It rocked slowly back and forth, letting out a continuous low hum. He ran downstairs in a panic, but his girlfriend refused to believe him. She laughed, marched up the stairs to debunk it, and walked right up to the bedroom door. She saw the chair moving. She heard the humming. Her laughter stopped instantly, and she fled screaming to the car. The decaying relic forces your logic to collapse. The doors were nailed shut. The floors were mostly gone. The sheer impossibility of a living human surviving in a sealed, collapsing trap is what makes the encounter so chilling. The third and final typology is the preserved tomb. Unlike a decayed relic or an empty village, these spaces are freshly abandoned. The emotional residue of a very recent loss still hangs in the air. One explorer grew up next to a deeply isolated, angry old man who constantly yelled at kids from his window. One day, the yelling stopped. Over a month passed in total silence before an ambulance arrived, and paramedics wheeled a zipped-up body bag out the front door. The son never came to clear the property. Years later, the teenager dared to slip through an unlocked side window. The immediate stench of death forced him to pull his shirt over his nose, but everything else was perfectly frozen. A bookmark sat perfectly placed. In a novel by a recliner. A single coffee mug waited on the kitchen table. As he stood in the dead man's bedroom, looking out the window at his friends, a massive, violent bang slammed against the far wall of the house. It was loud enough to freeze him in place for several seconds before he unlocked the front door and ran back to his own home. Later that night, looking across the lawn into that same bedroom window, they watched a solid black silhouette move. The shadow emerged from the bedroom doorway, walked slowly toward the glass, and stood directly in the window, staring back at them. Entering a preserved tomb turns the explorer into an intruder of a stagnant reality. They are standing in the exact spot where someone lived their final, lonely moments, surrounded by items that remain exactly where a now-dead hand placed them. These abandoned locations were eventually torn down, erased from the map, and replaced by new developments. But look at the vast expanse of time they existed in limbo. Those gap years, the decades they sat empty, created a dangerous window for trespassers to cross the line. Our brains desperately want to rationalize these encounters. We convince ourselves the woman at the car was just a homeless drifter, or the figure in the window was a coat rack playing tricks on adolescent eyes in the dark. You can bulldoze the brick and shatter the glass, but the people who walk down those hallways carry the memories of what they saw with them forever. Some doors are nailed shut for a reason, because as these explorers learned the hard way, abandoned spaces are rarely ever empty.